Good morning, everyone. Greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day. We value your time and we do not intend to waste it. As we go through this, we certainly respect all of you in your fields. We know you're expert at what you're doing, and our intention is not here to train you about entry level driver training, but more or less share the kind of unique position we have here. Uh, Once the FMCSA started doing their audits, we've been kind of like the spoke of the wheel. We've been getting a lot of post audit reports from potential customers or customers and post audit reports. And so our intent is to share some of this today, and hopefully it will be helpful for everyone. And, as we kind of move forward, uh, experience this, I think we all heard the news this week, the updates. They've removed 7,500 schools so far from the program. And be quite honest with you, that's not really 7,500 schools. There's a lot of entities that registered on the TPR that probably shouldn't have. And once they were contacted, voluntarily removed themselves from it. But about 2 months ago, they initiated 1,426 audits. That's what really kind of stirred up the hornet's nest and really started a lot of this stuff you're seeing in the news. As of what I think Wednesday, it came out. They announced another 550 schools they closed, and these were probably emergency removals. Just some of the headlines: they had unqualified instructors teaching class, failure to test students. That could go in a couple ways. That could mean they weren't doing evaluations on the students, or they could have been something involved with a third party, who knows, and then, severe safety issues. So that's the news this week. Let's kind of get into this and dive into it. We're going to have one spot in the middle of the presentation. We'll stop for some questions. James will be handling the questions and relaying them to him. And if we cannot give you an immediate answer, we have your email address. If it's something we can answer, we will be more than happy to get back to you at a later date. But again, we'll kind of keep this very loose. It is being recorded. So if you got to drop at some point in time and want to come back, you will have access to it. So kind of give a little bit of the background. The four that we're going to go is we're going to look at the audit preparation checklist, some of the common performance pitfalls, best practices for success, and then we'll review like a final audit review on this and go through it. Now, there's some of this stuff that I'm going to share with you, and it's from a unique perspective. I've been fortunate enough. I had 34 years at Swift Transportation. I ran all their schools. During that time period, I was on the board of directors with the Commercial Vehicle Training Association, chair of the oversight committee. But more importantly, that's kind of indicative of this conversation, I was on the entry-level driver task force that met quarterly with the administrator of the FMCSA, or I should say the acting administrator, because it seemed like every time we met had a different individual we were talking to. So this has been an ongoing process. Once this finally initiated, and this kind of goes back to that 7,500 removed, ourselves, Commercial Vehicle Training Association, the National Association of Publicly Funded Truck Driving Schools, and our members had a huge problem with a lot of these individuals just absolutely inundating the training provider registry that had no business being on there. We were actually working with, I can remember back to Tennessee Higher Education Commission, Mississippi Post-Secondary, that were just absolutely beside themselves because they couldn't get any cooperation or feedback from the FMCSA. You take the state of Indiana, thought the federal government was taking over truck driving schools, and so they completely got out of regulating truck driving schools. So right now in the state of Indiana, nobody does. So throughout these conversations, we've been pushing very hard to get this TPR cleaned up. So a lot of this is a lot of industry leaders have been pushing for this. The ATA's been behind us on it. So you're beginning to see movement on that. That's what's making some of the news. And one of the things I want to put up, Patrick Neiman's is basically the individual in charge of compliance for the FMCSA. he has 4 regional directors, and each of them has 12 field auditors. What you're seeing over the last couple of weeks, though, is for them to be able to target 1,426 audits, they had to train a lot of people that normally don't do this. And so as we go through this conversation, you're going to see there's been a lot of inconsistencies in how audits have been done. And a lot of it's based on the trainer, the auditor that you got, how much training they had, or if they're one of those full time. So we're seeing some entities are getting nothing more, believe it or not, than a phone call and actually admitting they don't know that much and just asking a few questions. And then some institutions are getting like a full blown, like it's a new school license, or if you're going for accreditation, a very deep, very detailed audit. But I think what we're seeing the inconsistency is the level of training those individuals have had. So let's kind of understand what they're looking at. The review of your training records, kind of verification, instructor qualifications, kind of touched on that a minute ago on the news this week. That was like the second thing they listed, unqualified instructors. And so that's probably somebody less than 2 years, or it could be somebody without a medical card. There's a lot of issues that could fall into that. Evaluation of student progress documentation. There's been a lot of push in the industry to go for proficiency based on time-based and things of that nature. So as we go through this, you're going to see the DOT is looking for a compelled story of where that student went from unproficient to proficient. And if you look in the FMCSA, the evaluations is plural, not one evaluation. So, we'll talk more on that. I'm bad about running down a rabbit hole and getting ahead of myself. Curriculum compliance and assessment. Be prepared for interviews with your instructors and trainees. It's important that we all be on the same page when we go through this process. So the audit pre-check list. On the audit notification, and you will notice if you were to dig deep into it, a lot of those 7,500 that were moved from never responded to audit notification. You will receive an email, and it's important that you kind of check your spam or junk folders or trash, not trash, but spam or junk. Email will come from a tpr.dot.gov. It will be a very detailed email. It's going to lay out exactly what they're going to be looking for. And within 24 hours, you should receive a call from one of the representatives that discuss the audit at the time and the place for this to happen. So you need to be kind of prepared for that conversation. And that's one of the things I really don't understand. Individuals, we have dealt with a lot of calls coming in. They said that they'd come in and one of their sites would dropped, or their school had been dropped because they failed to reply. I don't understand that part. I understand the email getting lost, but it's been my experience they're very good about calling you within 24 hours of you receiving that email. Yep, hitting the same wrong thing. Training records and readiness. All FMCS are required units documented, organized, and easily accessible. One of the things that we've always tell our drivers when they're out there in the real world and they're going for a scale house, make sure their truck is neat, their dash is clean. You want to present a professional, well-maintained individual going for there. The same as this, as us as training entities going through this. The documents need to be organized, easily accessible. If auditors there, they do not need to be waiting and looking for other things to look into while they're going through there. We're seeing things with their theory being submitted to TPR. You got 48 hours to do that. And then sometimes there's been a huge gap when they come and actually do the audit. They say the theory committed like 2 weeks ago, and then they just, so all that stuff needs to be documented, needs to be very clean and easily accessible for that. Structure qualifications. What I have seen basically going through a lot of this is a lot of people have an instructor with a medical card's been expired and they didn't know it, or they didn't do the self-certification. And All this stuff could very easily lead into where you saw in that news article about unqualified instructors teaching, and they take this very serious. So your instructor driver qualification file is basically what it is. You need to make sure that is absolutely current, readily accessible when they show up, and don't forget that. Now, one thing I don't have in this slide, realized it was going for this, they're also going to be looking for annual inspections on your trucks. So make sure everything is up to date, proof of your insurance on the trucks, your annual inspections have been done, and that your trucks are pretty much ready, like if it was going to be for a DOT inspection on the truck. Just make sure it's where it needs to be. Student progress. Students' practice logs are complete. Proficiency assessments are documented. There's that word proficiency again. Completion records are available. All this stuff needs to be tidy, organized, and well. You know, in the shameless plug, again, like I said, I worked 34 years at Swift Transportation and went from being a customer to a team member of this organization, a CDL PowerSuite right now. And I can tell you, our customers who use this system do not have to worry about these audits as far as the records go. You can just a glance at the screen right now, that's what an instructor sees when they pull up a student. It's completely paperless, can't lose anything, and that's the shameless plug for CDL PowerSuites on this slide. But whatever your method is, it needs to be complete. You need to have complete student files, be able to verify, and again, you need to be able to tell that compelling story of how that student went from point A to B as far as proficiency. You don't just show up and then 3 weeks later somebody evaluate them as proficient. They're not looking for that. They're looking for that progressive improvement until that student gets received to, well, attains proficiency. This is pretty much the stuff that we all know, the things that they're going to be looking for. And one of the things I highly recommend, if you do not have your curriculum like this, you need to do exactly that we have done here at CDL PowerSuites and some of the other or some of the other people that I've seen that have best practices. Every single thing in their school, how they teach it, their theory, the range, the road, is exactly tied into the FMCSA requirements. Just if you see that A 3.1 vehicle controls, if you go pull up the FMCSA book, that's exactly what that individual is going to be taught. And it's real easy for an auditor to come in, look at 8.3 hazards perception, and go for all this. If you lay out your curriculum, get that, go through the entry-level training documents and go through that and make sure you got every one of those covered. Because I can tell you that people who have not used a system, something like this, are not very detailed. It's amazing. One of the most common things is not maybe signing off on the student on coupling and uncoupling. And, it doesn't take much. And the thing is that if you get under review, and it's been my experience when we were meeting with the administrator, then later with Patrick Neiman's, when they removed like those 450 schools, I can promise you that they're a complete safety risk to the general public. It's been my experience that they keep your deficiency on some things. They're going to give you an opportunity to correct those things. They're not showing up to put chains on your door. But the problem is, if you get under notice of removal, you have to notify every single student on your campus and every single student that's going to enroll and come in a future class until that's resolved. So you don't want to be under that part. It could hurt you in your recruiting. And, we don't want that. Nobody does. Documentation accuracy. Again, we're talking about that compelling story to documenting what the student's done and that they've covered all those things. Again, you kind of see, even in the backing fundamentals, you can see the reg like A2.2 straight line back. And it's kind of I'll speak to that later. Just kind of going over things that are required. This is stuff that we all know. Instructor sign-offs for each unit. And we're seeing a lot of states even push for every time the student gets behind the wheel. We're seeing states now, and again, because the states can become more stringent, not less. You can see that a lot of states are even getting to the point where they want an instructor and a student to sign off after each exercise now. So don't be surprised if you see that. No gaps or inconsistencies or missing pages. Again, I know it sounds redundant. They want that compelling story, and I think a lot of when they go for these audits, it's kind of like the four cores of credibility. Are you credible? They're looking at your intent, your integrity, your capabilities, and your results. Are you intending to follow the regulations? Is your integrity there that you can make sure it's done every time? And your capabilities, is it actually being redone? And then when they come and do the results, your audits, are you actually doing that? So, there. It's been my experience, if they find out you have the integrity and the intent, they will work with you on the capability and the results. But if they feel like you do not have the integrity or intent to do this or do it safely, I think that's when you're going to see yourself get one of those emergency removal notices. And I can't imagine anybody on this call in that category. Everybody on this call right now is because we all care and we want to do what's best for our students and the general public. The interview phase. This is kind of a really important that most of you, I'm pretty sure, have huddles with your team members and you communicate clearly and you're all on the same page. You don't want an instructor giving contradicting information from one instructor to the other. And where I have seen this take place, talking to some of the individuals I talk to, potential customers, or would be like in a state where you're doing modernize testing, but you're still required to teach all those other maneuvers. For example, on AliDoc, you define what proficiency is, and you want each of your instructors to all be able to say that exactly and in line so that there's no inconsistencies. I can tell you back in the other life when I was at Swift, and we had states that were on modernized and on AliDoc. Our definition of proficiency was to put that truck into the box without any infractions, and we gave them a time limit, and that was it. We wanted them to get out and look as many times as they want, pull up as many times as they want, because again, it's not a CDL test. You define proficiency, and if you go talk to any of the instructors at any of those locations, they'll be able to tell you that exactly. So it's important everybody's on the same page. Trainees able to describe what they've learned. That really helps if a student had their own little portal where they could look back and see the reviews of their lessons, right? Another shameless plug for CDL PowerSuite. At our organization, there's an administrative portal, the instructor portal, and then the student has a portal as well. So we got that transparency and communication going from the admins to the instructors to the students. That really does a great job keeping us. So if you don't have something like that, you need to make sure you're having that communication and you're doing your morning huddles and keeping everybody informed. And you really need to make sure that you review the process of what the FMCSAs come and look for when you're going to do that audit. You want everybody to be on the same page and prepared. I promise you, if you put all this and you do it right and you're doing everything you're supposed to, this audit's going to go very quickly. You'll be in and out. Now we reached the first point of questions. James, do we have any questions? Yes, the first question, are you referring to a medical card when you're speaking about the medical that's attached to your CDL driver's license? Absolutely. And that's where you hear me refer to self-certify that may not so. Yes, exactly. And again, the self-certify is where they are happy to provide that to their not every state's online, and it caused a little bit of problem that their DMV would not have a current medical card. So that's where I'm going to. When I mention that, are the schools required to drug test? That's been a long-standing controversy from FMCSA and the Drug Clearinghouse, and we continuously get mixed answers on that. Your instructors with their driver qualification files, they should be in a drug testing pool. And we have gotten answers that the schools should be, and especially the carrier schools, even though that they're not guaranteed them employment, all the students have to be in a drug pool and they're required to do the drug testing. And of course, they can't report to the clearinghouse until they actually get the permit. So I will try to see if there's any more updated on that, but that's been going on a long time, and we keep, at CBTA, we keep getting, different answers on night driving. Are they looking at actual nighttime or a conversation pertaining to that? It's exactly that. It can be, you can document that, or at least the conversation pertaining to that. Because if you get it, like for an example, I know it's an extreme example, but in Alaska, that would be a hard thing to do at certain times of the year. So you got to document that. And you kind of run into you guys with automatic transmissions. You're almost running into some of that same stuff on the FMCSA requirements on the shifting. So you're running into that. Is there any logs or templates that you can share with us? We can, and I think best if you just reach out to us after this, and we can actually go through that and show you what those templates and logs look like in our system. But I think that would probably be best, and we'll take a note of that and reach back out to you later. Can you explain again that self-certification process? What I was referring to is them making sure they had their physical card. And you take like Mississippi, they have to scan it in and then verify that the DMV received it. And we've had found times where that didn't work. Typically, we explain the maneuver and give the student the option, try the maneuver with an instructor, then demonstrate. And after the student demonstrates, they can do the maneuver 3 times without errors, without guidance, SharePoint. And that does absolutely sound reasonable, and it will be acceptable. You just need to make sure everybody's consistent with that. Within 30 days prior to that. What's the requirement for training providers keeping records of drug screens prior to training? Prior to training, what is the requirement for training provider? Well, these questions are jumping around on me. Well, all the training records and everything you have to keep for 3 years. Training providers keeping records for drug screens prior to training. We'll get back on you. I do not require anything. When I know one thing, we would go into it, that the drug screen usually has to be good within 30 days. And that's a lot of times that's a policy. I don't know if that's a requirement by the law, but we can certainly answer you back on that. So we require during 30 days every student prior to bilateral training. I think that's fantastic. Scott Miller, where do we find our instructor qualifications? It's in the FMCSA under the Scott. I will absolutely email you the regs to that, and so you can easily find those. The simple 20,000 foot view is they have to have that license for at least 2 years, and they have to have that class of license at which they're teaching. Correct, the state. Yep. A lot of states in Michigan, a lot of them are doing that automatically. You're correct. Is paper log adequate, or is electronic a little more? Well, paper logs are adequate. They will prove what you need to prove as long as none of them's missing. And here's the thing with paper: is somebody actually taking the time to go back and check that every day? One of the things that I've always been told: you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And what I'm seeing when I go to schools and I visit, a lot of people, the directors of schools, they don't have the time or resources to be auditing all this paper. So, of course, I'm going to say electric's more preferable. And reason my experience with this system for over 2 years at Swift is it's kind of a lot of built-in safety guards where you cannot, miss something that you're supposed to. There's a dashboard where you can see the progress of every student, where they've been signed off proficient and everything. What are you doing to hear the English proficiency type assessments and everything? I know there's a lot of schools are doing this. I know a lot of carriers have been doing this for years. There's a English proficiency test that most individual, schools, or some schools are doing, I should say, but mostly the carriers are. Uh, and it's a very simple. It's a test where it's going to ask them to click on something in the truck to identify, like the speedometer or the RPM gauge, or click on the right mirror, and then it's going to give them a bunch of options on signs, and they're going to have to tell them what the signs mean. But that's what a lot of entities doing. Carriers have been doing this for a while. I think if you see in the news, a lot of these carriers that are making the news are these probably one of these carriers where they're switching the DOT numbers and things in their trucking stops. Can someone who's teaching, wait a minute, can someone who's teaching pre-trip on a class trade, is it okay if the instructor has a class B license? Well, are they teaching on class A truck? That's what you're supposed to say. And technically, they're supposed to have a class A license if they're doing the pre-trip. That's exactly what the reg says. So you might have an issue with that. Now, if they're teaching the class B license, if they're doing like reviewing it in a classroom, you might have a little bit of a leeway. But strictly as the reg speaks, that individual should have a class A license. Okay. How do you log electronically when you have 10 trainees at the same truck? I've seen records where they're assigning the entire on all 10. They actually split the time between them. In our system, it's very easy. An instructor can actually, once they get behind the wheel, and what the FMCSA defines as behind the wheel is the student who actually has control of the truck and not sitting in the sleeper berth, but actually has control of the truck. Our system, if you're on the range and you're running 3 trucks and 10 trainees, it's very easy. It's just a click of a button to get one started. Then you hit the little plus sign and select the other student, get them going. It's very easy. And then worry about being an instructor. And then when they get out behind the wheel, do an evaluation. And then the student will also see that evaluation on their portal on our system. So it's very easy with our system. So let me get back. And again, we're going to do some more questions at the end of this. So let's get started back on this. So let's go over some of the things we're hearing. Some of the common compliance pitfalls that we're seeing, and there's quite a few of them. Let me get the chat box out of the way. Top audit red flags: missing or disorganized training records, instructor sign-offs not complete, required FMCSA topics not covered, incomplete student progress logs. Missing or disorganized training records, that's just always been a huge problem with paper. When you got X amount of instructors going out with paper, and then again, it takes a human element to go back and audit those files and make sure everything's in there. So, and then sometimes it's disorganized. And again, if you got an auditor and you're having to hunt and dig for stuff, it gives them time to start looking for other things. Instructor sign-offs are not complete. I can't tell you how many times over the years. In other life, I also, for Professional Truck Driving Institute, I was a lead team auditor for them, and I would go in and audit schools as we're going through, they're going through the certification process to be certified for PTDI back in the day. How many times I would come across a piece of paper and the instructor hadn't signed off on it, or it was incomplete. And, so things like that are going to cause a problem for you. Required FMCSA topics are not covered. So if you go through the whole system and everybody's reviewing your stuff, and then they have to go dig to see where you're meeting this requirement and that requirement, that's going to drag your audit on and make it go a lot longer as well. So it's a whole lot easier if you're completely organized and you got complete progress logs if you see that picture right there and that smiling face sitting at the desk, that's kind of where you pull up and you could see at the office, you could see where every little green check on the backing fundamentals and straight line back, you see a green check, that student has hit proficiency. If there's a little dash right there, they haven't started yet. And speaking of proficiencies and what I have seen, topics not covered, you would not believe how many times the coupling and uncoupling is not documented. And the student, you can't tell that compelling story that the student was proficient on that. So again, that's kind of gives you a little bit of a view of students portal, what they can see. Best practices for success. Make sure you're on range with your cup of coffee, right? Maintain accurate records. Document every session, date, topic, and assessment. This will make you be able to sleep so much easier at night if you're making sure that this is done. Whether you're doing it through a digital system like ours or paper, you will find a lot of times instructors will kind of drop the ball on this. So make sure you have a way to document this. And you could see our system is very easy. Keep digital or physical files organized, kind of redundant what we were talking about on the other slide. All documents are loaded, printed. Make sure you got that when you're getting ready for this audit. Your staff is prepared and ready to go. Training facility clean and organized, digital systems functioning. And what I mean by this, especially like if it's a carrier school, you'll see a lot of times the stuff that you guys would have in a state school would be all complete in one file. But in some like the carrier schools, a lot of the stuff, the physicals and drug testing and things like that would be like on their carrier side as far as the driver qualification file. So if you're like a carrier and you're using 10th Street, you need to make sure that's functioning and you got access to it the day of the audit. Again, you don't want them waiting for when you're sitting there trying to get all these records done. All right. Let's talk about some of the things I've seen. This is coming from a lot of phone calls from potential customers, usually because I think they didn't think an audit was ever really going to happen. And all of a sudden now they got a notice. And I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to, and these are not our customers. Some of them became customers as part of their corrective action plan after the audit. If you're in modernize testing like you are in Georgia, for example, you still have to teach all those skills. You still have to do the alley dock. You have to do the parallels, and you have to evaluate, make sure those. I cannot tell you how many people have said, "Well, the state told me I only had to do this," and I said, "Dude, that was part of a bill that was passed through Congress over 15 years ago, requiring all those skills training. This whole process has been going on for almost 30 years now, but a state or even FMCSA should not say that you don't have to do those skills until Congress changes that. You got to teach the alley doc. You got to document that. Now, again, I think these individuals were given an opportunity. Well, I know they were given an opportunity to correct this and get it back right, but you have to teach all the skills. You can't just teach modernized training. The other pitfall, like I said before, I've seen in the coupling and uncoupling. And then the other biggest failure, and where people have gotten in trouble that I've been talking to, is they do the theory and they're just giving them an average score for the theory. In the theory, you have got, when you get these audits, they're going to want to look at all 30-something of those chapters where that student individually passed each one of those at 80% or better. An average doesn't mean anything. That's fine if you want to use that for your score, but an auditor is going to want in there and see each one of those theory requirements where that student passed that individually at 80% or more. Those are the four biggest things that I have seen. I think most of everybody on this call, unlike what you see in the news, those are the low-hanging fruit, the bad. apples of our group. Again, like I mentioned earlier, Patrick Neiman's over to compliance. He has 4 regional, 12 auditors for each region. And the pressure that's been put on them right now, they're going and they're getting the low-hanging fruit. And it's been my experience, even from the beginning when they started, they spent a long time. When they finally decided they had to start enforcing this, I think they had a tiger by the tail and didn't really know how to handle it at first. They spent almost 8 months going through legal to make sure they go through the processes and they weren't going to get sued every time they turned around. But it has been my experience, even things that would just make me shake my head, if they come in and find you deficient, they're going to give you an opportunity to correct it unless you're just a huge safety hazard to the public. Now, again, but you don't want to be, you go through all that and you do not want to be proposed, being shown that they're possibly considering removing you from the TPR again, because then you got to tell your students, you got to tell all your potential students, it's on the website. And again, so you don't want to do that. That was really kind of some of the key takeaways. So if you get communicated with from the DOT, communicate with them. It has been my experience, the more you communicate with them, the better you're going to do. I think it goes to that intent and your integrity. If they say you have the intent and integrity to do what's right, they're going to work with you really hard to make sure you have the capabilities so you have the results that you need to have. So communicate with these people, work with them. Do not avoid them. Stay with them. Closings, organization, consistency are critical. Instructor documentation is the most common gap. I think we've talked about that. When you send out an instructor out with paperwork, you lose control over that. You don't have visibility of it till it's turned in. If you got somebody that quits on you or somebody that just loses it, or, something happens to damage that paper. One of the things I really love about this system is that you as an administrator or director of a school can see what's happening in real time if you have your people on some digital tool like ours. I was at a customer last week in Dallas and has multiple locations across the country. And, and the thing that he told me more than anything else, being on this system has allowed him to not have to lay in bed at night worried about if he gets an audit, if he's going to pass it. So something like this, and I think ours is the best, but that's just me, shameless plug. Compliance is an ongoing process. Remember what I said earlier, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. This system gives you real-time opportunity to inspect what's going on at all times in real time, not just a one event. And again, one of the other things I think as we're going through this is causing people problems where they see a student spent like 2 or 3 weeks on the road and range, then all of a sudden they see one evaluation and they're proficient. They're not looking for that. They're looking for that compelling story. They're wanting to see John Doe come out here and see that progress. My guess, as they get down and they get the lower fruit out of here, they're going to probably be able to identify pencil pushing really quickly. We've all had that where instructors just want to give everybody the same score or the same hours. They just do it by math. Just share a little something. I think what's going to go on with the hours, we're all required to record those hours and report those hours. And there's no requirement in entry level for hours, but they've really intended, I think they were going to collect those hours and gather enough empirical data so that they were going to be able to come back at some point in time and say, hey, this X amount of hours equals a safer driver. One of the things that CVTA and the National Association of Publicly Funded Truck Driving Schools, when we were on that entry-level task force on the TPR meeting with the administrator quarterly, is we really stressed that you can't make any determination on these hours because they're not good data. A lot of people are just to say, I got 4 students out there, it's 8 hours, they're dividing it and they're throwing that in there, and they don't know if that's true or not, because one Atreus study 15 years ago said that when's enough time is when it's enough time, because each individual is different. And we all know, we've done this long enough to know if you got 4 students on a truck, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 get a lot more time than the other 2. So some people are using 50-minute hours, some people are using 60-minute hours, some of them using semester hours. So basically, the hours that's being reported to the TPR is junk, and there's really nothing that they're going to be able to do with that. So they're going to have to punt on that. They're probably going to have to really track these drivers' CSA scores and tie it back to the TPR registry to where they got their training if they're really wanting to see what schools are doing. But I promise you right now, that's more data than they can even begin to compute. But who knows with AI where we might go with that. So, quick checklist: training units documented, behind the wheel on theory hours documented and recorded, instructor credentials current, student logs complete, curriculum matches the FMCSA. That is one of the biggest things, whether you want to do this electronically or not. Get that FMCSA book up, go to the entry-level training section in the 380s, and go through and check off every one of those requirements where that is actually happening in your course. If you haven't done that since February 22, you might have a gap in there you don't know about. Make the sign-offs, make sure your sign-offs are complete. That if somebody's saying the student's proficient, they're going to make sure somebody signed off on that, and you can track who did that. Records are organized. Again, you want to be organized, kind of like that vision I said, the truck running for the scales. Make sure you're organized. Records are easily accessible. Facilities are prepared. Staff briefed. And your key contacts ready. So if you've got access, if you're going to have access to some stuff outside your office area and things that you need, make sure you're ready to go on that. But again, reach out to us if you have any further questions. If we go through these questions and see something that we have not answered, we will certainly reach out to you. So again, thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great productive day. And again, if there's anything we can do, reach out to us. We would be more than happy to help any way we can.